Welcome, everybody. So this is the first program in a series that we're doing with the Historical Society called A Day in the Life. So tonight we're doing a day in the life of an international pickle consultant, which is Miss Lisa Moeller. Lisa grew up with her brother and sister during the 1960s in San Francisco, California. At 17, Lisa moved to the Sacramento Valley area and received a BS in agronomy from the University of California at Davis. Upon graduation, she interned with the Dow Chemicals Herbicide Division. She then worked in the Midwest with DeKalb swine breeders before being transferred to North Carolina. Lisa began working at Mount Olive Pickle Company, where she was employed for 25 years. In 2012, Lisa received a Master's of Science in Food Chemistry from North Carolina State University. Her research project involved evaluation of hamburger dill chips packaged in plastic versus traditional glass containers. Her journeys have taken her around the world. She went to Morocco to study how globalization is affecting women in Africa. She visited Costa Rica to study coffee and cocoa production, and India to better understand the procurement of pickles and peppers. From watching her grandmother reuse the wax paper in Rice Krispie boxes as a child to being a panelist at Duke University's Sustainable Business and Social Impact Conference in 2012, there has been one theme, and that is that she is improving quality of life through heightened environmental and social consciousness. Her passion and talents lie in taking all the lessons learned through time and space and turning them into meaningful projects with attainable goals. She's optimistic about the potential impact she can have on the food industry through partnerships with her company, Fashionably Pickle. So let's welcome Lisa Moeller. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Paige. I'm a frequent visitor to the library here. I'm a IT idiot, and so I come and use the scanner and the printer and some of the equipment here, and through some of our conversations, this presentation involved. So the title is A Day in the Life of an International Pickle Consultant. I don't normally call myself that, but when I think about it, I guess that's what I am. When Paige asked me to do this presentation, one of the things I thought about was how many people, when they're children and they're asked what do they want to be when they're grown up, how many say an international pickle consultant, and I'm guessing it's probably zero. I wanted to put this slide on here to show you where I have had projects in the last 10 years. So I am fairly global. I work with both companies outside the United States and companies inside the United States to procure and produce and move products into Europe and into the Americas. So I worked in Sri Lanka, I worked in India, I worked in Vietnam, I worked in Brazil, the North Americas. So I frequently travel. One statistic I thought was extremely interesting I heard today, at any one time there's 10,000 planes in the air. Any one day there's 100,000 flights that take off, and on a daily basis there's 1 million people that travel in airplanes. So I meet a lot of folks that do a lot more traveling than I do, but I've enjoyed every place I've been and worked. I'm going to talk specifically about 3 projects that I think would be of most interest to people here. One is in Gimich, Turkey. I actually had a residency permit there, so I lived there for 3 years in the last 10. One project I'm going to talk about is in Trstenik, Serbia. This has become a big project for me in the last 6 months. Serbia is a beautiful country with some really unique characteristics. And then the last of the 3 projects I talk about is in southern India. First, I would like to discuss a bit about cucumbers and pickles in general, what my expertise and the majority of my current projects deal with, and then what I hope to convey during this presentation. Cucumbers and pickles. We're here in, one of the largest, I think Mount Olive is now the largest pickle producer in all of the United States. So we hear these terms all the time, but I don't really think we think that often about the actual cucumber or about the pickle. Why are we pickling cucumbers, and how did this happen and get to be such a big industry? When we look at a cucumber, a green cucumber is 95% water. So we don't bake with it, we don't broil it, we don't cook it, because if we dried it out, we basically would have nothing. It's 1.5 to 2% sugar and has a small amount of fiber, fat, and protein. So it's basically a bundle of cells that hold water, 95% water. But when we talk about what we eat and globally popular produce, this is worldwide, these numbers seem small, but they're in millions of metric tons. So annually, every year, somewhere in the world, we produce 180 million metric tons of tomatoes, 93 of onions, but 72 million metric tons of cucumbers. And that number seems small until you portray it like this. If you took that 72 million metric tons and you laid those cucumbers end to end, they would go to the moon and back 120 times. Actually, math-wise, it's like 250 one-way trips to the moon. So when you think globally how many cucumbers this is, this simple fruit, 95% water, but we produce a lot of it, not just in the United States, but globally. In the United States, there's 3 main categories of cucumbers. You can pretty much, some overlap. Some people do a refrigerated, partially fermented, but these are the 3 main categories in the United States. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the acidified and the fermented, solely because the refrigerated isn't as popular in other countries. And I'll show you pictures. When I lived in Turkey, the refrigerated section in Turkey was about 2 times the size of this desk. There is no refrigerated produce there, and anything that's refrigerated is generally just meat. Even milk is shelf stable, bought off the shelf. It's not refrigerated. The energy is so expensive in these countries. I looked at yesterday, gas in Turkey right now is $4.69 a gallon, equivalent in US dollars. Serbia, it's almost $6, and in India, it's even higher than that. So we complain about gas being $3.29, $3.30 today, but these other countries are paying more. So they limit what they refrigerate. So refrigerated products haven't taken off there. Most products are acidified or fermented. In the United States, though, refrigerated products have really taken off. And so I do work, especially in Serbia, with some companies that want to produce refrigerated products for the European market, for sale in England and Germany, high-end grocery stores. But refrigerated products have become more popular in the US. You have Grillo's, you have O-Snap, you have Wild Brine, you have Sonoma Brinery in high-end grocery stores. It used to be Claussen. Claussen used to be really the only refrigerated product for a year, but I don't know if Mick, if you remember, but years ago, Mount Olive Pickle did a wonderful refrigerated product. But to logistically move that refrigerated product, it has to stay refrigerated for the entire time when it leaves. So it's too hard to put 1 pallet of refrigerated product on a truck with 19 pallets of non-refrigerated products. So Mount Olive stopped, I would guess, maybe 25 years ago doing refrigerated products. But they're taking off now in the U.S. They're often very tasty. It's like you would make at home. So these products are low acid, low salt, fresh spices, but this refrigerated product requires a lot of refrigeration, so I won't talk about it a lot in my presentation. I'll mention quite a bit about acidified products. So since 1975, the majority of processed cucumbers on grocery store shelves are acidified and pasteurized. So these trucks that are coming into Bay Valley and Mount Olive, within hours of those green cucumbers coming in, they can put them in a jar, pasteurize them, and then go into the warehouses. So there's really no holding time. It's a fast throughput. And this is compared to fermented. Fermented go in the tank yard, you have to go through a fermentation process, there's a holding pattern. But the fresh pack is a once through. The product is usually labeled fresh pack, and the majority of Mount Olive and Bay Valley's product is acidified production. Now, I started in Mount Olive in 1988. Prior to 1942, everything that Mount Olive produced, everything that Bay Valley produced, were fermented pickles. They all went through a fermentation process. They took these cucumbers, they put them in these tanks. Before 1988, they were all wooden tanks, and they fermented them. They turned all the sugars into acids, and then they took those pickles and made them into finished product. Now, it's most of the quick service restaurants, so if you go to McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, any of these restaurants, whatever you get on your burger is a fermented chip. So a large part of the industry, most of this is in Michigan, is still fermented cucumbers, but not the jar packers. So this is where we're going to do a little exercise here. So in the United States, this industry represents, just for the jar product, sales in a year, $1 billion. But it also represents, for the quick service restaurants, $1 billion. So we really don't hear much about them. There's probably about 5 different families in the United States. They started these companies about the same time Mount Olive Pickle was started. Most of them on the 5th generation. But they've been around for 100 years. Most of them have as many or a little bit more fermentation tanks than Mount Olive has. And they're doing extremely well. Their business is consistent. And nobody, it's a hard business. It's crop-based business, so there's no real newcomer to that. But Paige is going to help me here. She's going to pass out these cucumbers. And what I want you to do is I want you to smell it. Just smell it. And then pass it to the next person and just smell it. Now, it doesn't have much odor. You really, if you didn't touch it, you might not know what it is. Now Paige is going to cut those cucumbers. Or break them, or you can break it. Just break the cucumber. As instant you break the cucumber, the instant you break it, it starts to smell like a cucumber. And why am I having you do that? Because this is the only crop. If somebody can think of another one, if I'm baking, cooking, making anything with strawberries, dehydrating them, doing anything, a strawberry tastes like a strawberry. But these cucumbers, what I go around the world and help people do is make a pickle made from a cucumber not taste like a cucumber, but not taste like anything else that they don't want it to taste like. So the beauty of this fruit, I wrote down statistics so I wouldn't miss this, but cucumbers are a 60-day crop. So in other countries, they plant the crop and they start picking it at 60 days, but then they continue picking it. They don't destroy it. Here in the United States, they plant so many acres that they can harvest 60 days from them. And then the next day they plant so many. So they're continuously planting, knowing that 60 days later they're going to continuously harvest. That's a big difference from what they do in other countries. Plant once and continuously pick. The average U.S. consumption of pickles is 8 pounds. So the average American eats 8 pounds of green cucumbers in the form of green cucumbers or pickles a year. Michigan is the #1 pickling state for pickles, cucumber state for pickles, and Florida is the #1 for salad cubes. If you were to eat 104 grams of cucumbers, you would only consume 16 calories. So I did the math. You would have to eat 28.7 pounds of cucumbers to get your 2,000 calories in a day. So really that little bit of sugar doesn't amount to a lot of calories. So one interesting fact, and you women asked me earlier, what's changed? Like, when I got into the business, it's like, we've been doing this for 3,000 years. Why do I have to go help people? Why hasn't already understood what it is that we should do? And one of the things I think about is 100 years ago, every pickle that we produced was fermented. They didn't know how to pasteurize. And so to me, this is really interesting. In the 25 years I worked at Moeller of, I never even thought of this. But when my grandmother and my great-grandmother made pickles, they did it in barrels. And they put grape leaves in those barrels, or black currant leaves. And then they put dill, or they put garlic, or they put cinnamon, or they put horseradish. And why did they do that? We became accustomed to those tastes, because every one of those items is antimicrobial. Horseradish has alleoisocyanate in it. Cinnamon has cinnamaldehyde. Garlic has sulfur. These compounds that we got used to eating and still eat. McDonald's puts a hamburger dill chip on there. But as human race, we didn't decide that dill was our favorite flavor. We got accustomed to dill because when our grandmothers and great-grandmothers were making these products, those are the ones that didn't spoil. They didn't know why they didn't spoil, but they didn't spoil, and we got used to eating them. And you think about this is a 60-day crop. You know, in the olden days, it gave you something fresh to eat. It gives you texture to whatever you're preparing. But if you can turn this cucumber into a blank slate, then you can flavor it any way you want. So I challenge you, next time you eat a McDonald's hamburger dill chip, bite into that piece with the cucumber, chew it up and swallow, shut your eyes, and 30 seconds later you will taste the dill. It carries that flavor whether you recognize it or you don't recognize it. And you know you bit into it because of the texture. So it's a big part of the nuance of what we eat, but we don't spend that much time thinking about why we've always done what we've done. And it took me 25 years and then going off my own to come up with some of these thoughts and ideas, reading books on salt, reading ancient recipe books. What did people do? And then trying to figure out why they did what they did. And my best conclusion is because that's what worked. If they had put something in there like tomato, it would have had no preservation capabilities. So we eat what we are accustomed to eating from people that brought these products over from old worlds. So we just talked about cucumbers are very little odor until you break them, and then there's compounds in there that instantly react with oxygen and bring that cucumber flavor, but then through the pickling process, that flavor is lost. So I have taken pickles that I fermented and I have flavored them as pineapple, as blueberries, as raspberries. I can turn them any flavor you want them to be. And that's the beauty of this particular fruit compared to other fruits and vegetables. And we just went through this. Why is it important? You know, because it is unique. It is something that we can adapt to different flavor profiles, whatever those flavor profiles are. So I want to talk a little bit also about my expertise. What do I bring to the table in these projects? I don't go out and recruit projects. People call me and ask me if I will help them do different aspects to improve the quality or the profitability of their businesses. One of the things I do, and this is globally, and I'm doing it right now in several countries, is looking at new items. Where can we go that we can produce things that might be appreciated in either Europe or America that we don't procure? What kinds of fruits and vegetables can add to that pickle category that makes it more attractive as a category? Also, what's become big in the last couple of years is packaging choices. How can we package it? What can we put it in? What's the shelf life? And how does it affect different fruits and vegetables? And then the last one that I spend a lot of time on for different folks is turning fresh produce into ingredients. So how do I take things that we add to certain cucumber items that maybe the minor ingredients come off at a certain time of year. And this could be carrots or jalapenos, it could be cauliflower, it could be these minimal ingredients that you put in these containers. But procure them and then hold them in a state that they become an ingredient. So buy them when they're the freshest and the least expensive, and then hold them till when we really need them. One of my true loves is fermentation. So I spend a lot of time going to these factories. You know, I told you most of these quick service restaurant factories in the United States are 100 years old. It seems like as the generations pass, the people that they sell to ask them to do different formulations, take certain things out. They don't understand now through the generations some of this knowledge really wasn't passed down. They take it out. They take it out and then they have a disaster. And then they want to know what can they do differently. So we look at their operation, or I look at their operation and figure out what it is that they can do differently to either maintain that quality or fight back against whatever the push is to change. I love this slide right here, and it took me 30 years to really wrap my head around what is happening in fermentation. And if you drove here today, if you put fossil fuel in your car, if your house is being cooled, if your oven is running, then you are running on energy that came from the sun. The sun created these small algae and organisms that died millions of years ago and got compacted into the earth. We're extracting them now, but that energy originally came from the sun. That same energy every day is growing these crops that we harvest. And this energy is now being stored in materials that we want to consume, whether they be fruits or vegetables or grains or pulses. But if we were just to eat an apple all the time as an apple, we would miss out on apple cider. If we were to eat a mush with hops, we'd miss out on beer. So you think of all the things that are fermented. You think of all the sourdough bread, the pastrami, the pepperoni, the beer, wine, olives, all the things that we ferment. And that fermentation process is just us understanding how to use microorganisms to take that energy that's been created and turn it into something that now we want to consume, something that's in a different form. And I think the beauty of right now, the beauty of 2023, is now we have the equipment in these universities to actually discover what some of these compounds that are produced in the fermentation. So you hear about probiotics, a lot of people want to eat these bacteria that are good for their digestion, but even more so than that, I think that these bacteria are producing a lot of compounds that we haven't even named that are good for our health. And when I go around the world and I see people that are eating fermented foods, they are so much healthier than folks in the world. So I'm kind of a firm believer in fermentation is a really good way for us to have different food choices. The other thing that I spend a lot of time doing is trend analysis. So I've been to Serbia for a couple projects. My last project started about 6 months ago. I was actually hired by USAID to go and do a business plan for a company to look at their viability of getting into either cucumbers for the US market or the European market. So I look at what's going on in the world. And I want to put this slide up because I think it's really interesting. I did a presentation to the Alberta Health Services a few years ago. And at that time, China was #1 in population. As of April of this year, India has surpassed China. So India now has 1.428 billion people. The other interesting statistic on this is I think in our lifetime, that Nigeria and Pakistan are going to pass the population of the United States. So where we focus a lot on what's happening in America, because I deal with other countries, I'm really interested in what's happening in other parts of the world. Not just what food choices do they have, but what is really happening in these countries that might affect our ability to either procure the crop or do business in some of these other places. I think if I ask most people in the United States, what are the 8 most populated countries that represent 55% of the population, I don't think very many people would get that right. So the globe is a big place, and where folks are in art are really, really varied. So the other thing is in another 27 years, the population is going to increase 20%. So crops, things that we don't grow here. I like to get up in the morning and drink a cup of coffee, drink a cup of tea. I love chocolate. I like to eat bananas. We don't grow any of those things here. So how do these things change? And I don't think that we won't have them. I think somebody will come up with a way to figure out how to produce them differently. So and I don't think it's too early to start thinking about some of these things. So I spend a lot of time on trend analysis, emerging markets, complementary categories, eating habits. One of the things I find really interesting is my kids like to eat healthy, but they've really bought into, there's a place in Goldsboro called Clean Eats, where Kelly can go up and buy prepared meals. They're really delicious, really very natural ingredients, tells the category, the calories, everything that's in there. And my son eats at a place called Healthy Roots. They buy these meals that are delivered to them. They used to be really expensive. A lot of these have gotten a lot more reasonable, but I think we're going to see pickles and some other products move through some of these days. So I'm almost done with slides or trends, but I thought this one I had to show because even if you are look at trends, what has happened for long periods of time, I think this one's extremely interesting. So in 1997, most people were buying food from the grocery store and they were eating at home. 60% of the food they were eating was by the grocery store. By the time we hit 2018, that had dropped to 40%. 60% of the food we were eating was now being eaten or purchased from gas stations or quick service restaurants or eaten in restaurants. So that had completely changed. Till we hit COVID, and that completely wiped those trend lines completely out of whack. Now the Moeller of Pickles and the Bay Valleys of the world did great because everybody was going back to the grocery store so they could eat at home. But all these quick service restaurants or quick service restaurant pickle producers lost a lot of business. These folks in Michigan really hurt. Some of their categories, 30% loss during that pandemic period because people weren't eating out. So you can follow trends, but you've got to be ready for that unexpected, that event that puts everything into a different direction. I live on a farm. I lived on this farm for almost 40 years. After I went to Turkey, I had to buy some Mediterranean donkeys. I'll talk in a minute about the dog. I actually adopted her from Turkey. She was a rescue. I have pastures with cattle, but I love living in the country. And I'll take on almost any project that has anything to do with sustainability. That's really, besides fermentation, where my passion lies. And then for today, my hope for this PowerPoint is that it's just enjoyable. I want you to feel something for cucumbers, pickles that you didn't feel before you walked in this room, the beauty of the crop, the beauty of the product, but I want you to just enjoy what I have to say. Country statistics. So I'm going to talk about Turkey, Serbia, and India. And I love every one of these countries, but they're vastly different. So the land area in Turkey ranks 37 out of all the countries. But Serbia ranks 113. So Serbia is a really small landmass compared to Turkey, and India ranks 7. So we already talked about the population of India is 1.428 billion people. The population of Turkey is only 85 million. And Serbia is even less than that, 7. Population of Serbia is 7 million people, but there's over 11 million people living in just Istanbul, Turkey. So you can get an idea of how rural some of these areas and how small some of these countries are and how they kind of fit into the mix. The other thing that I think is important, especially for me, going to them, is recognizing what their society and what their everyday life is like. So Turkey is 98% Muslim. They follow the Islamic religion. So when I'm in Turkey, I hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. So I lived there on the ground 3 years. I had a residency permit out of the last 10 years. The call to prayer comes at different times of the day. It's blasted everywhere. And it's beautiful. I like it. And me as a Catholic, I never had an issue, not one. Turkey has a beautiful family system, community system. It's really, to me, an extremely safe place. Serbia has 85% Greek Orthodox, and India 70% Hindu, but some of the areas I'm working in right now, there's really a lot of Catholics. So we see some Catholic churches and cemeteries. I was there about a month ago in Mysore, and there's this beautiful church dedicated to Philomena with 100+ foot spires, just really a beautiful cathedral. I put the exchange rate down there because I think this is really critical. This is the drive for a lot of these countries. And the other reason, my son loves to travel, but my son hates trading money. He hates going to a country and trying to turn our currency into his currency. And I try, since I go back to these places so much, to keep so much currency on me so that when I do go back, if I need to pay somebody for help me with a suitcase, a cab driver, I have money that they deal with. The exchange rate for the lira a couple of days ago was 1 lira equaled 3.7 cents. When I lived in Turkey, I was paid, part of my salary went to Akbank in Turkish liras, and it was over 40 cents. In 2016, the Turkish lira equaled, and I didn't miss a zero there, it equaled 37 cents. 7 years ago, a lira was worth 10 times more than it is today. Now you think about how we would feel if our $10 bill in 7 years was worth $1 compared to the rest of the world. So these people are suffering. They're trying to come up with ways. A lot of them borrowed money in euros. Now they're going to default on those because they can't obviously pay it back when they're selling in their own country at these differences in rates. In Serbia, their currency is worth less than a penny compared to our dollar, and the rupee is 1.2 cents. And the rupee and the Serbian currency have stayed relatively stable. But one thing I see in Serbia now is inflation really affecting them. When you go in the grocery store, the prices that they're having to pay are so much higher for foods they want to eat. So I'll pass this around. In one interesting thing in life in an international pickle consultant, trading this money. So I was in England, this is a couple of years ago, and I traded some money, and they gave me this 5-pound note with the Queen's picture on it. And when I was going through England a month ago, I tried to get a cup of coffee with this, but it's no longer any good. You had to trade it in. So I was not going to get the coffee, and they won't take my money. So you have to be really careful when you're trading this, but think about what that would do to our mentality. If the $20 bills we had saved for my birthday and put in an envelope now were worthless, that we had to exchange them out of the bank. So this 200 rupee note is worth $2.40. This 200 Turkish lira is worth $7.40. And 2,000, and you feel like you have great bills when you go in and you get these 2,000 bills. It's worth a total of $18 US.
And it was like so much more.
Yeah, no, you feel rich when you exchange your money because of all these big notes, but the money doesn't trade like you think it would. So now I'm going to get into the 3 places that I want to talk about. Are we pretty good for time?
It's 6:35.
6:35.
2 minutes.
Okay. The first place I'm going to talk about is Turkey. My second home is in Turkey. So when I flew into Turkey, I lived on the Moeller Sea. So this is a picture of Gemlik Bay. I could walk here from where I lived. It was about 4 or 5 miles. But this was my view every morning. So I woke up when I fixed my cup of coffee and looked out. I had a porch in the back that could pull the glass doors open. I was right on Gemlik Bay. And this is where the dolphins came in to have a meal. So I could sit there and watch the dolphins come into the bay, feed, go out of the bay. From May till September, I could swim. There was starfish in the water. The water was really warm and beautiful. Turkey is an unbelievably beautiful country. And so these pictures show from, I lived in an olive grove actually, outside of Gemlik. And but Turkey's done a really good job of walkways, ways you can get from one place to the other. And everybody there exercises, they all walk. So along the sea, it's really beautiful. You can just stroll, you can go, anywhere, go into town to buy groceries or supplies. But also off of this walkway that's by the sea are all these little shops that are really mom and pop's operations. They're absolutely phenomenal. You can go in and get a piece of dessert or a cup of coffee or Turkish tea or meals. The 3 years I was there, I got to watch this guy working on this boat. So Turkey, they're really good at craftsmen. They're really good at building things. They build phenomenal houses. Their architecture actually beautiful. But this guy was doing this by hand. The other reason I included this slide is everywhere in Turkey you see the Turkish flag. Turkish people are really proud to be Turkish. I had one fear when I was in Turkey, only one fear. Not I wasn't fear that my religion was different, I wasn't fearful of the language difference, I was fear of one thing, earthquakes. So it took me 24 hours to go from my doorstep to my doorstep in Turkey. 24 hours no matter how I did. Usually it was 2 flights, landed in Ataturk's airport. Then I would go into, take a cab over to Yenikapı, which was near the Blue Mosque, Hagia Sophia, the cistern, and then I would take a ferry over to Yalova. And in Yalova, there's earthquakes. And when there's earthquakes, thousands of people die. These buildings are beautiful, but they're not structurally built to hold up to some of the disasters that happen. So I'll show you a picture of my assistant that I hired. She's like my adopted daughter. And when I started going there, she thought I was half crazy because I would say, we'd be in the middle of the warehouse, and I'd say, touche, earthquake. And then she'd look around like, okay, if there's an earthquake, I said, no, you've got to have a plan. No matter where you are, it's your responsibility to know where you're going to go, no matter where you are. So after about 6 months, she started yelling earthquake at me. And I had to tell her where I was going to go. Turkey isn't really for the people that can't get around while walking, because most streets are cobblestone. A lot of stuff is really hilly, really beautiful, but it's not paved sidewalks, good curbs, and a lot of elevation differences. But everybody walks. This was kind of my reason for getting my Mediterranean donkeys. This guy, he used to patrol the hills, the olive groves right above where I lived. And I'm sorry, this picture isn't really clear, but I pulled it off the internet because I wanted to show an overhead of the factory where I work. So this factory was in Gemlik. There's one road coming in here, and one of the things I wanted to do an overhead, but you see there's no employee parking. So all the employees that are sent to this factory to work at this factory are bused into the factory. So they're all women and men from villages nearby that they want to work here, but gas is so expensive and vehicles in Turkey. If you buy a vehicle, you're taxed by the Turkish government based on the size of your engine. So your taxes can be as high as your car purchase was. So most of these folks can't afford vehicles, and if they can, like I said, gas right now in Turkey is $4.69 a gallon. So it's expensive. So no employee parking, the employees are bused in. this factory packed half of their income was from Burger King, and half of their income was from jar product under the Barak label. They had a tremendous amount of this product that's in barrels or in 1 ton, metric ton containers that's being acidified and held as an ingredient for the winter time. And then it doesn't show up well, but there's kind of a white space in there. They have about 350 tanks, and I'll show you a better picture. Tanks where they produce the hamburger dill chips for Burger King. And when I say produce the hamburger dill chips for Burger King, this one facility here produced the hamburger dill chips for Kenya, for South Africa, for all the Middle East, for Turkey, and for half of Europe. So it was a big part of Burger King's business. This is Tuche. I love the girl. She's still like my adopted daughter. WhatsApp's beautiful, so I know where she's at, and we talk regularly. But they allowed me to build a lab there. The original, I'll show you a picture of Mr. Turgay in a minute, but Mr. Turgay and his family owned a little factory in Gimlet, and Erdogan decided he was going to build a road from Istanbul to Izmir, and it went right slam through their factory. So they thought, well, go big or go home. They went big. And they built this factory. So when I was coming to this factory, it was fairly new. They didn't have a lab really to do R&D. So we did all kinds of exciting products here. Tucci and I are making some sweet lemon pickles for alcoholic drinks or sweet tea. This picture here, we were actually doing some experiments because the owner said they would give her 1 week's vacation if she could turn all the cabbage they had white. We're having problems with some off-colored cabbage. So we worked on everything from green tomatoes, cauliflower, cabbage, pickles for Burger King, to everything from capers, kohlrabi, you name anything that could be pickled. We did it at this facility. I said that all the employees were bussed into this facility. All the employees are also actually fed lunch at this facility. So morning you have tea time, afternoon you have tea time. And this isn't only pickle factories, this is every factory in Turkey. So there's big companies that do nothing but catering. So you got a wonderful lunch every day at the factory. It came with the meat, it came with a super salad, it came with all the bread you could eat and the dessert. And all the tea or water you could drink. You got an hour break. But also in this picture you can see all the women in the background have the white scarves over their head. These are all women from the villages. Most of them worked in these factories here in Gimlet or Gimmich for long periods of time. But it was a difference that was nice because you got time to sit down with everybody. Also at this factory every month, whoever's birthday was, they brought in these unbelievable cakes and sang a little happy birthday, and we all had cake. This is a man I dearly love. This is Turgay Tufecioglu. Turgay Tufecioglu is the one that started this Zetterson. The Zetterson plant is a weird name to us, but Zetin in Turkish means olives, and Tursu means pickles. So it was Zet Tur San's company. So to the Turkish people, it makes sense, all of them pickle company. And you can see on our jackets, we have this label, Barak. Barak was his sister's name. And it's one of the labels that's sold in Europe and in Turkey. And this was for Women's Day, so also they have all these little events throughout the year, and so he was passing out roses. They also do a lot of social programs. So Air 2 is one of my favorite people in the world also. He is Mr. Turgay's son. He rescues dogs in Turkey. So they had 2.5 acres, 1 hectare of property. And he would take dogs that had been in fires, that had been run over, that had been abused, and you put them in this area. And since they fed people lunch, then that lunch would go to feed these dogs and pay for the vet bill. So my dog here happened along when there wasn't any room in the inn, when they had all the dog houses full. And so we actually kept her in the olive grove next to the plant. We rehabbed her for 6 months. She had been run over twice, she had scabies, and she was starving to death. And at the end of this time, I didn't know where she was going to go, but she had the best personality in the world, so I told her to get her a passport, and I'll take her to America. Yeah, she had to get a passport. Yeah, she actually has a passport. It was $250 to put her on a flight. Airtrue has a crazy sense of humor. He had named her Unlucky. I was like, that's not going to stay, so her name is Grace now. She's at my house still. But one little funny story after that, when I got the passport for her and we got a brand new cage, at that time she really was unlucky because we put her on an international flight going from Eastern Wolf to Toronto, and they dropped her off the ramp. The flight was supposed to leave at 11 o'clock, at 11:15, 11:20, we haven't gone anywhere. 11:30, two guys from the ramp crew came up to my seat and said, "Are you Lisa with the dog?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, you dropped the dog off the ramp. The crate is broken." The dog's fine, she's in a truck. What do you want us to do? That's what we stuck to, but the crate's not important, I just want to get her in there. And then 15 minutes later, the crate's in such bad shape, she can't. So long story, she ended up getting here, but within 2 weeks of when she got here, there was a hurricane, and 2 giant trees fell on her house, and we lost half our house. So I was kind of wondering if I had, but she said nothing about us happened. Now her name is Grace. But there's a lot of social programs at these different companies. So I told you what I did there was help them with different products, and one was Burger King, looking at how to improve the quality of their stock, but also doing new recipes. So we did Burger King relish for Middle East and for South Africa and part of Turkey, and they were having promotions on hot dogs. This was at a Burger King exhibition. We went to London with Burger King. Part of their problem in Turkey, all their tanks are enclosed tanks. So we have tanks that are pretty much open to the environment. Their tanks were enclosed and they really weren't managing them like they should. So they were having some off-flavor bloater problems, so we corrected that. And here's a better close-up picture of some of those containers they were filling. So that whole entire yard, acres and acres, is filled with produce. It's hailed, so their procurement's completely different from ours. They procure the product, hold it in an acidified state, and then pack it in the winter. So in the summer, they're just harvesting. We talked a little bit about why are we going to some of these countries, India, Turkey, Serbia, for these cucumbers. Turkey has beautiful agriculture, but everything is handmade, or most of it is handmade. We're really not going to find people to bend over and use in the United States to pick different size cucumbers. But this is in multiple picks. The woman with gloves on there is the daughter of the owner. This area was recently irrigated. Everyone built these giant reservoirs, so they came in and started putting produce in there that they could under irrigation. So this is all with mulch and drip irrigation, but with multiple picks, not destroying the plants. And this is what I was talking about earlier. In the United States, they're putting equipment in most cases, so it's once over a pig. So that's the piece of equipment, and that's what the land looks like afterwards. So we come through and we harvest the sizes that most of the producers want. Quick service restaurants, they need a hamburger deal chip that's about this big. So they're looking for those cucumbers bigger. The slabs, the strips, the chia sweet pockets, all bigger cucumbers. So these machines right here, they go through the field, they pick the big ones, but the small ones go out with the vines. So going to these other countries, we're looking to fulfill these products in the sizes that we want to consume and some of the quantity. Again, the big difference. Destroying the plant once over pick, and then multiple picking, but doing it with hand labor. We also, in most of those containers, you saw those big plastic containers. There were jalapenos, green tomatoes, cabbage, cauliflower. So we would go out to the fields and look at crops, and these were jalapeno fields. And the guy here in the picture, Emre, he was over the tank yard there. In Turkey, males over 20 have to go into the military. It used to be 2 years, now it's 1 month, and you pay 30,000 Turkish lira for 6 months. So they still have mandatory military. So when I first met Emre, he had just come out of the military. This is Tucci and I in the fields. It was America against Turkey, picking jalapenos, and America lost. Tucci could pick so many more jalapenos than I could. In the past, Turkeys use a lot of labor from Syria. This little boy won this picture taken so badly, but I want you to recognize his appearance here. He's in the field picking jalapeno, and this little boy here, who is actually a farmer's son. So Syria is next to Turkey, they're neighbors. Syria's acquired a lot of, Turkey's acquired a lot of Syrian migrants. And the picture on the other side here, we're actually in the farmer's shed. So he's the one that had the jalapeno field, and he sets up a shed in the fields where they inspect the jalapenos. They go in his container, they put your vinegar and salt in here, and then it goes off to the factories to be packed when the factories have time to pack the product. A few just travel log pictures. One of the things I love about Turkey is the history. It's such an old country. And we can go to these places that really aren't on TripAdvisor or Booking.com sites, but they're local and they're really a lot of Roman ruins. So looking at how things have passed through time in this area, I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of history. But a lot of these ruins are absolutely beautiful. Nobody visits them much. The sheep herders run their sheep from. In the villages, the folks have their poultry and animal. But I love some of the architecture, some of the ways. We think about a house that's 100 years old as an animal. I mean, they have chicken coops that are 300 years old. I mean, it's just so, there's such a difference in the perspective of time. Last couple pictures, and these were really important to me. One of the trips we took, we went down to Ephesus. And in Ephesus, there's a lot of Roman ruins, and some of them are well preserved, and some of them aren't well preserved. But also in Ephesus, outside of Ephesus, there's the Basilica of St. John. And there's what is thought to be the last house of the Virgin Mary. So the belief is that John took the Virgin Mary after Christ's crucifixion. And he took her by sea. And he came to this area, and this was the last known house that she resided in. And when I was there was a mass, so I could go through this church after the mass, and it was, it makes the world seem different. You know, we'll look at our clocks and we see 60, 60 seconds, 60 minutes. We'll look at a circle and say 360. We really don't question why 60. The number system started there with 60 as the base. So things that we still use every day come from there. Jesus' mother's last house was there. The numbers on the clock, the numbers in a circle, the coinage that we use, giving a value to something that doesn't have a value, not trading something that we know has a value, but trading for something that we hope has a value. These things came from there. And it kind of grounds you, those thoughts that you're there. And this happened a long time ago, but then in the grand scheme of things, not so long ago. So just to go through some quick pictures, because as you say, we're pretty much out of time. You don't wear shoes in the houses in Turkey. You take your shoes off at the door and you put their shoes on. I lived on the Marmara Sea, but it wasn't far for me to go to the Black Sea. You hear a lot of this now with the Ukraine war, but Turkey's on the other side of this Black Sea. It was absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. To be on these beaches in the morning, in the middle of the day, and then travel back home and go through these hills and being in the snow. So I could go in the water, and then I'm actually at high elevations. And going through Turkey in 4 hours is like going through 10 of our states. Bread you buy every day. And I would really upset people there because I would bring a label of our bread and say, I buy a loaf of bread and I can keep it for 2 weeks. The bread you buy here, the next day it was stale and the next day it would be moldy. There are no preservatives. It's baked daily, basically eat it daily. Turkish breakfast and foods are unreal. My daughter-in-law, my son, my daughter all came and visited me several times when they were there, and they love the food. This is not even big Turkish breakfast. We stayed at a hotel one time and it was just me and one other person. We thought, well, breakfast won't happen. They would have filled this table, which is absolutely unreal. How they feed you and what you eat. A lot of what you eat is in season and it's fresh. Because it's Muslim, there's no pork. Eat a lot of beef, fish. This is my last slide on Turkey, but I won an award. Not for being a crazy American, but because every time I went to Turkey, where I lived and where I could look out at those dolphins, I didn't want to see one piece of trash on the beach. So every time I came, I got some buckets and I went and I picked up everything. People were around there were like, oh, she's crazy, picking up somebody else's trash. I didn't want to sit there and enjoy it. I didn't want to sit there and have to look at it. And one day there was a bad storm came in, and it blew a lot of trash on the beach. And I had been there for a couple of weeks. And so that morning I went out and I started picking it up. And this woman that everybody loved in the community, her husband was a professor in one of the big colleges, and they had retired there. And she would go out on the dock and she'd swim a mile down, do different strokes, and then a mile back. This day, while I was picking up the trash, she kicked off her sandals and she got one of my buckets and she started picking up the trash. And before I knew it, almost everybody in the area was picking up the trash. I was a crazy American. They didn't want to come out and necessarily help me, but when they saw her doing it, then it became okay. And when I left there, they gave me this big award for cleaning up their deeply in a bottle of wine. Yeah. Well, I was also in Turkey. One of the things that's wonderful is it's a really cheap flight into Europe. So I met these folks from CUNY. I started some projects with them. These projects, the first reason I took them was to my father. My great-grandfather left Hamburg on the late 1800s, and their office was in Hamburg. And I really wanted to go and see if I could figure out where my great-grandfather sailed from. He was supposed to come with his brothers and sisters and mother and father, but for some reason they left earlier, so he was supposed to come with his older brother and younger sister. His older brother was a wagon wheel maker and he died. And so my great-grandfather had to come at 17 with his younger sister steerage from this area of Germany. At that time it was Germany, Prussia, and Denmark. And the borders kept changing, and so what they wrote was they just didn't feel good about being there. So I had an alternative drive for wanting to go to Hamburg and start on the other project, but and Hamburg has beautiful museums where you can go and look at, it's immigration, emigration, ship museums where you can go and look at the logs and manifestos and figure out, where you people, about what time they came. And the connection with these folks that I just showed you, Sebastian and Rebecca, was I met them in Germany, but they wanted me to work with them on a project in Serbia. Now, why Serbia? Serbia because the minimum wage in Germany went to $15 an hour. So the German people don't want up the prices on their produce. They know they can't continue to afford to pay $15 an hour. So they were looking at different grow areas, people that could procure this crop and do it where they could still manage the produce, but not raise their prices as much as they might have to. I worked on that project, that was a couple of years ago. Right now, I'm working with this fellow here. I met him for the first time in Bulgaria. I was asked to speak at a Reich Schwan conference. He's the Reich Schwan dealer for Albania, Montenegro, Bosnia, and Serbia. He also produces a lot of raspberries, black cherries, and sour cherries and blackberries. And so he hired me to come and kind of do the same thing I did up the road for CUNY, was look at putting in a tank line. Look at, they know now if they're going to come into Serbia and they're going to grow the crop, they're going to get both large and small cucumbers. And they need some market for their large cucumbers. So they're interested in going into the quick service restaurant business, fermenting cucumbers and putting in making hamburger chips. I help them also put in a lab, and I'm going to go through these slides pretty fast because I don't want to run out of time or running out of time. But because they work with berries, they have a tremendous amount of equipment and know-how. They also have a lot of refrigeration. They have ammonia refrigeration, so they can handle crops in different ways. One of the things I love about Serbia is they have great infrastructure. They generally have cheap energy other than gasoline. They have a really educated workforce. The only thing they really don't have is port. So they have to move their pickles because this country is inland somewhere else. When I stay there, I stay in a resort town where all the Europeans come. It's a spa town where there's all these mineral springs. This is a bridge that's near there. It's the Bridge of Love. People come put their initials on a lock and put it on the bridge. We were talking about picking cucumbers. I showed you how they pick in Turkey. This is how they pick in Serbia. The majority of the cucumbers are picked with this machine right here. So this machine is coming through the field. It's called a Fliegler, and the people are laying on their bellies looking that way. So they have multiple picks. They're not tearing up the crop at this point. They're doing a little bit of damage, but not much damage. But it's not as hard as what you saw in those pictures of the people in Turkish, or you remember as a child picking this cucumber. It's like, these plants, if the pickle's this long today, it's this long tomorrow, and you're just constantly harvesting. So you can't go out there and say, well, yeah, I'm going to work hard today, because you're going to have to work hard tomorrow, and the next day, the next day, the next day. So Serbia is looking at doing vertical production, which I'll show you in 1 second, in India, and doing once over pick, the majority of their product will be picked like this. We have beautiful grow fields. Most of it's under irrigation, drip irrigation, mulch. This field belongs to the large vegetable producer in Serbia, which is also partnering with this other guy to produce cucumbers to fill their tank yard and look at doing products in other countries. These were some of the pickles that were pulled off one vine, and this field was had some issues, but they're looking at multiple sizes, what varieties work, what varieties don't work. So it's kind of in progress. Here's another picture of this flitter going through the field, which you can see it covers a big area. We get a lot of cucumbers that we can pick over and over again. And one of the things I love about my job is the appreciation I get from the people that I work with. And so the first time I went to Serbia with these guys, I had to write a business plan. And the interest was to attract European and American businesses. And these guys, after I left, put a presentation together to an American buyer, a company. And I didn't see the presentation until it was done, but the final slide had a royal flush on it. And I was the queen. I thought I was going to cry. So they're putting pictures of the people that help them. And these are good guys. They're entrepreneurial. They're in a country that is having issues with currency and politics. We actually NATO bombed Belgrade in 1999. So it's recovering the economy. We kind of see the people there that really haven't gotten over the amount of people that were killed in that country in those conflicts, and we're part of NATO. I've never been mistreated, but I am very aware of what has happened in the past. So in a few slides, I'll show India. I love India. I'll still remember the day Bill Bryan called me in 2000. It would have been 2006, but I left in January 2007, asking me to go to India. And ever since I took the trip to India, I have fallen more in love with India. India makes me humble. India grounds me. 1.4 billion people, but there's some beauty, there's some flow to India that to me makes sense. So I tell my children, now since that trip I go back fairly regularly. I was in the Western Ghats, and I said, when the world goes bad, kids, you're going to find me in the Western Ghats. That's why you go to concrete India. Because this area, there's just no more beautiful area. And I grew up in San Francisco. So, I could go to Northern California, which is absolutely beautiful, but it doesn't compare at all to the Western Ghats. India doesn't have a cold hot, it has a wet dry. So when I was there a month ago in Bangalore, it was actually cooler than it was here in North Carolina. So, but there's areas that are extremely lush, and this is how India grows cucumbers. They grow them, we were talking about this earlier. So you don't have to bend down, so you don't have to put this equipment there. We were talking about a gallon of gas in Turkey is $4.69, a little bit higher in Serbia, it's $7, a gallon equivalent in India. People ride bikes and they ride motor scooters, and they use a lot of hand labor. So these cucumbers are grown on these vines. They have specific varieties where they produce a lot of little cucumbers. So, a lot of what we consume is from there. Most of these plots are small. We're looking at several different areas in India because weather does change there, and they've had some issues with production because of too much rain, too little rain, too much heat, too little heat. There are people that are doing trials there too. This is our women's doing trials in India. The majority of the people that pick are women. I don't think I've ever seen a man in India picking cucumber. I don't see many men in Turkey picking cucumbers, so it's kind of considered what the women do. We're looking at alternative crops in India. One of the ones I'm interested in is baby corn. The Indian people love baby corn because they can harvest the baby corn, but this was the farmer's baby corn. This was the farmer's wife. The son was carrying the fodder from the field. So besides getting the baby corn, they also get the food for the cows. So they like this crop, so we're looking at how we can turn this crop into some finished products. It won't be a big sales, but for small companies, it will, maybe a different flavor profile. It could be an item that what they do well. One of the things about India that I love is almost all the farmers that I meet, their motivation is one thing, to get their kids to college. So this woman, we were looking at some specialty crops, and I never even got to look at the specialty crops because she bushwhacked me and wanted me to look at her phone, pictures of her daughter in America. Her daughter had done well enough in school and they had done well enough. And so these companies and these farmers, so 1.428 billion people in India. The southern part of India, most of the time can't communicate with the northern part of India because the language is different, the food is different, their religions are different, the gods they pray to are different. So it's one country, but it's not really exactly one people like we would perceive it from American Indian. It's very different. But nowhere do I go in the country that isn't the same sentiment. And when I go to these agricultural areas and I go to these plants, a lot of them are leveraging their land to get the money to pay for next year's material so they have something to sell. And we were at one factory a month ago, and it looked like scrub, looked like Arizona. Land was selling for $227,000 an acre, the equivalent of $100,000 an acre. So some of these farmers that have land, they do have some money in their land. They don't necessarily have money in the crops they're selling, but they're willing to sell that so their children can have a better life, be educated. So we talked about these pickles coming to the United States from these Indian producers. A lot of them come in these barrels. These guys do an unbelievable job. It's either come fermented or they come acidified. The factories are absolutely gorgeous. A lot of them are state of the art. I went there 5 years ago to 21 different factories. It's not just one or two, it's quite a few. But you look at the export of gherkins from India going around the world, it's a $250 million business for them. And they've been doing it for a long time. So every time I go, we go to a couple factories that we're producing at. We go to at least one or two new factories. I'm just going to show a couple pictures of some new factories we go to. These factories are absolutely beautiful, state of the art, fine equipment, talented people, and they're willing to take formulations, take new products that I want to develop in a really short time, be able to produce them. We're looking at green tomatoes, bell peppers, mixed pickles, carrots, cauliflower, bell peppers, and cucumbers. I just have a few more slides. This picture right here, somebody snapped while I was in the car, and I asked my friend who is Indian, when's the last time a white person was on this road? She laughed. She said, probably not in 50 years. I've never felt out of place. I've never been gawked at. I've never gotten a double stare. But I recognize that when I'm there, I represent America because there aren't very many Americans that go there. This man here, we were drinking chai tea on the side of the road, and he was just doing this thing. He was relaxing. This is the typical dress in India. These pictures are some meals I've eaten there. When I'm in India, I'm vegetarian. This woman does some of the cooking for me. In this project I was on several years ago. And this is why I'm vegetarian. We talked about refrigerated pickles when we started out. There isn't refrigerated. So these goats were killed probably hours before I got there. They're hung up in the mayonnaise. Same way with fish. There is a refrigeration. And so I'm a little leery. We talked about gas prices, how people get around, motor scooters and bicycles. This is a typical village shopping experience. So I asked them to take it to a village, let me see how you shop. So these pictures are of the village. The guy that took the pictures was Indian. He took them with my camera, but he asked every one of them, could he take these shots? So they're selling spices, they're selling food, but they're also in all these little villages selling flowers. So it smells really beautiful, gardenia, different flowers to make scarlet. So most of the women wear it in their hair. That's the rural side compared to Bangalore. So we did some shopping one day in Bangalore. Bangalore's extremely crowded. And we made out 6 more sides. So one of the things I love about India, we lost here with media, with television, with radio, with movies, is storytelling. It's the ability to tell stories and for stories to mean something to us, for us to think about them. And we were at one of the hotels in this little squirrel was running across the roof. And my friend said, let me tell you this story about that. I used to call them chipmunks, but they call them striped squirrels. And the story goes something like this. It was his name was Lord Rama. And this is told to everybody that's in India. This is how the children are brought up. Lord Rama needed to get across the sea. So he hired the monkeys to take these big boulders and place them in the sea. And in doing that, these little squirrels started taking little pebbles and putting them in the gaps of these big rocks. Well, the monkeys belittled the little squirrels. You little fools, what are you doing? You're only carrying little pebbles. Well, Lord Rama said to them, always remember, however small, every task is equally important. The project can never be completed by the main people alone. They need the support of all, and however small an effort should always be appreciated. And that squirrel got the 3 stripes because Lord Rama, in his love for what they had done, rubbed his finger down their back. That's in the storytelling, the culture, the history. We were able to have botanical gardens that are actually absolutely beautiful. We were able to go to see national parks where there's wild elephant, wild boar, wild buffalo. We were able to see the temples, the different gods that they pray to. I mean, these are thousands of years old. The architecture is absolutely unbelievable. They're visited by many people every day. And this is my last slide here. At the end of the day, I hope that I give to my kids and my grandparents what my mom and dad gave to me. Do what makes you happy and do it well. I don't care what you do, but do it well and let it make you happy. And I consider my wish in my life really, really, really well. So I hope I make them proud. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was awesome.